This is just basic 101 level Magento. So let's see what the effect is. We'll go back to our browser here. Oh, we got a lot of stuff going on here. Let's see. But basically, yeah, that's what's going on. We have a model, Mage Catalog Model Product. I think you'll see this up at the top here. Yeah. So that's that. So what happened? You know, but let's look at what happened. Well, Mage get model. So again, this is why I can't recommend enough having a modern, professional IDE, where, especially for a system like Magento, where you can jump through function calls and get the PHP doc references, highlighting code completion, etc. Or and you can even use Xdebug to step through the code. It's a really tough system to learn if you don't if you can't navigate your way through these function calls, because they are a bit scattered. So what's happened here, of course, was we jumped from the Mage class. We jumped from our CMS index controller. We're using the Mage class. So here's Mage get model. Now, get model takes this string, right? So right here, model class is equal to catalog / product. And the arguments in this case would just be an empty array. Now, so that calls the config object's get model instance. So here we are over in Mage core model config, calling get model instance. So the model class, again, this is the string that's passed in. So this is equal to catalog product. And to determine the class name, we call get model class name. Get model class name takes that thing that was passed in, and it does something interesting. It checks to see if there's a slash, and if there is, if there is a slash, which there will be pretty much all the time, we call get grouped class name. Now, grouped class name, that's the one that handles models, blocks, and helpers, and we'll take an argument here, model. So there are analogous functions all over the place in this class. You can see helpers are called with get group class name, only they pass in helper. And blocks are called, only they get called with block. That's the difference. So this is the sort of the ultimate function here. So get group class name just takes this slash, explodes it, and checks in the configuration. So we have global models or global helpers, global blocks, and looks for, in here is looking for the group name here. So the group is the very first part of the string before the slash. So in our case, group here is equal to catalog. And then before we start to build out a class name, though, this is where we check for rewrites. And I think we'll be talking about that a little bit later as well. But basically, if we see a rewrite, we'll use the rewritten class name. Else, we'll go through, Magento has some lower level functions. But basically, we go here and we build out our class name based on what's present in that class node under catalog. So in our case, if you look in the configuration under Mage catalog, let's see, etc config models catalog class. This is how we sort of resolve our way here. So from this we get Mage catalog model as our class prefix, and we append the class that we passed in, and that's the second part. That's what's after the slash. Append that, and then run this UCWords function on it, and get our class name. And then we call, then we'll return the class name, and eventually, and then we'll call new, and then the autoloader kicks in, et cetera, and so forth. So that's how that works. And again, we'll be talking about this even more later, because you can't talk about this enough while you're learning it. So that's a product model. Now, for the resource model, something interesting. What happens here, I'll go ahead and show you, is we'll use Mage get resource model. Resource model is still going to match catalog, but then inside of the catalog node, it's going to look for resource model node. And then this value here, which is just needs to be a unique string, becomes another node that we look for under models here. And in here, we get the class prefix for resource models. And of course, we'll be dealing with this more later as well. So what does that look like when we want to instantiate that? So all we have to do is say Mage get resource model. And then here, rather than just dump the entire class, I'll just say die. Now, let's see. I'll assign this to a variable. Actually, I'll do this. Echo get class. And then die. Mage catalog model resource EAV MySQL 4 product. So you see, though, hopefully you notice, we still have product at the end, but we're definitely not dealing with Mage catalog model anymore. But all we're dealing with is exactly what we found in the configuration. Mage catalog model resource EAV MySQL 4 product. See how that works? We just take the prefix that we find. That is, that's basically is found through that first part of the string before the slash, and then we just add the class name to it. And that path, of course, would be Mage catalog model resource EAV MySQL 4 product. It's very easy, but hard to learn. So again, the class name is the location in the file system. Good. And for sales helper and template block instance, it's more of the same. For helpers, we just simply call helper. Now the sales helper is interesting because we only need to pass sales. That's the interesting thing with helpers, is that if you don't pass in some other part after a slash, if you don't have a slash, you're going to get this default behavior. The default name for helpers and modules is data. So generally throughout the code in Magento, you'll see calls like this, Mage helper sales, or catalog, or whatever. But what that's actually going to resolve to is sales data. That just happens in the config object. In fact, I think I can show you. Yeah. So get helper class name. I'm not sure why this was done, but it was done. So that's the one that behaves a little bit differently. But you can see all you do is we're just appending slash data if there's no slash present. So that's all that's happening there. So these two calls here, sales, Mage helper sales or Mage helper sales data, they accomplish the same thing. And then on the front end, let's see. Yep, Mage sales helper data. And again, Mage sales helper is a class prefix under global helpers sales. And that leaves the catalog, no, the template block instance. So this would be we're going to use the core template block. This is the basis, incidentally, and of course this is, we really will be talking about this in depth on Wednesday with when we get into rendering. But the core template block is the main block that you have, main block that you're using when you have a block class that uses a template. It just has some of the necessary chain of functions, fetch view, render view, and a specific protected to-HTML method that allow the rendering system to work its magic on your block. Just take that on faith, and we'll actually look at the internals of that on Wednesday. So, core. So, and again, this is Mage core. So this is the core module inside the Mage namespace, which is in the core code pool. But again, that can be confusing. So Mage core block template. That's this class here. So now this one, though, template blocks are a little bit different. I'm sorry, not template blocks, but blocks in general are different. They are, there's no Mage, well, there is a get block singleton, but you don't want to use this. You instantiate your block against the layout object. So the layout object is, in a way, it's kind of similar to, I guess it's kind of similar to the config object. So Mage core model config, that's the class that knows about the configuration. Well, the layout object, which is Mage core model layout, is the one that should know about all the blocks that have been instantiated in the system. So, how do we do that? Well, we can do that any number of ways because we're in a controller. I'll show you the method that's used. It can be used anywhere. And that's Mage app get layout, and then from the layout object we call create block. So the analogous thing to Mage get model or Mage helper is getting the layout object and calling the create block method, and then you just simply pass in you can pass in the type, and the syntax is the same to what we've seen so far. So we'll just pass in core template. Okay. So with Mage app get layout, create block, core template, perfect. Now if I go and I look at and we've got it. Any questions? Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of heads shaking. That's good. We're not doing anything practical here. We're just giving you guys a chance to get your hands on this. So a couple of things just to remind you about before we close out this lesson, and that's that there are these factory methods that you use. They end up interacting with the configuration, and based on the configuration, you end up with objects. And you have these different ways of getting it. So the create block is the most distinct in that you have to use the layout object. And helpers, the other pitfall. Just remember that a helper the helper factory method with no / in it, it's going to be whatever module / data. Okay. Very good. Okay, go ahead and revert. Go ahead and revert everything in your index controller, because we're good Magento developers. And we're done.